I'm telling you from 70 years of experience, don't listen to them.
Yeah. Listen to yourself.
Yeah.
He doesn't gossip. He doesn't play around. Denzel doesn't need to raise his voice. He lowers the whole room with just his presence. And if he doesn't like you, trust me, you'll feel that cold distance way before you ever hear a word. For more than 40 years, Denzel Washington has stayed untouchable. No scandals, no breakdowns, no embarrassing flops, just discipline, control, and razor-sharp precision. But behind all that calm exterior lies a code, a system that decides who he lets close and who he shuts out without warning. Denzel doesn't chase fame. He lives for focus. He doesn't respect noise. He respects craft. And if you cross that line, there's no redemption. Training Day, Malcolm X, Flight, Fences. The performances speak for themselves, but the real power sits in the silence between projects. That's when he makes his toughest calls. He doesn't argue, he doesn't rant. He just never calls you back. And once you're erased from his circle, there's no coming back in. He's worked with the biggest names in Hollywood, but only a handful earned his lasting respect. The rest, they expose themselves on set, in interviews, or just by trying too hard to be liked. And here's where it gets icy. 6 actors who crossed Denzel's invisible line, not publicly blacklisted, not dragged through headlines, just quietly erased like they never existed. Number 1, Chris Pratt. There are actors Denzel respects instantly, and actors who burn the bridge before they even realize it's been built. When Denzel signed on to The Magnificent Seven, he didn't just agree to a Western remake, he agreed to share the screen with 6 men carrying that legacy alongside him. That's not a role he takes lightly. He doesn't show up for laughs, headlines, or cheap chemistry. He shows up to tell the story. But from the jump, Chris Pratt was on a completely different wavelength. Pratt brought what Hollywood eats up: big energy, charm, and a smile that never fades. But that looseness, the constant flow of jokes, improvising, and winking charisma clashed with the serious tone Denzel was building. To the audience, Pratt was magnetic. But to Denzel, that vibe shattered the balance he was fighting to create. They were castmates. On paper, they were partners. But behind the scenes, something was off. Or maybe it clicked. Just not in the way Chris Pratt expected. Denzel has worked with comedians, improvisers, even actors fueled by chaos, ego, and arrogance. He can handle all of that. But what he will never tolerate is someone treating the craft like it's just a performance to show off.
It's a gift. It's an opportunity, and most importantly, it's a gift. Obviously, everybody here is talented enough to do that, but don't get it twisted.
That's exactly how he seemed to view Pratt. Not reckless, not disrespectful, just not serious enough. To Denzel, it wasn't about talent. It was about alignment. He's the kind of actor who sinks into the frame, who lives in the world of the story, not around it, not above it. And when he looked across the camera and saw Pratt bouncing energy instead of grounding it, he pulled back. A crew member put it bluntly: Denzel doesn't need you to be intense, but he needs you to be still on set. The vibe stayed professional. No explosions, no fights, no messy recast drama. That's not how Denzel operates. Instead, he just narrowed his focus until Pratt faded into the background. And once the film wrapped, that disappearance became impossible to ignore. Denzel skipped photo ops with Pratt unless it was contractually required. He never praised him in interviews, never highlighted him as a standout. And for a man known to uplift younger talent, that silence wasn't random. It was a verdict. Even when the press asked about The Magnificent Seven, Denzel spoke about the director, the themes, the legacy. But Pratt's name never crossed his lips. And here's the thing. Pratt probably thought it was all good. The smiles on the red carpet fooled him into thinking there was mutual respect. But with Denzel, silence is never neutral. It's a boundary. He doesn't slam you in headlines. He doesn't throw shade on podcasts. He doesn't need to. Once he senses an energy he can't trust, he leaves it behind without explanation. And Chris Pratt? He was left behind before the final cut even hit theaters. Number 2, Jared Leto. There's a type of intensity Denzel admires, deep, focused, internal. And then there's the other kind, the loud kind that demands attention before the work even begins. That's the lane Jared Leto lives in. They never shared the screen, but their paths crossed through press events, mutual collaborators, and industry whispers. On the award circuits, whenever Jared Leto's name came up, Denzel didn't bother to hide the chill. It wasn't personal. It was strictly professional. Leto's infamous method approach, staying in character off camera, sending strange gifts to castmates, turning every role into performance art doesn't impress Washington. It drains him. Denzel came up through Yale, trained on the stage, built on discipline. To him, the character belongs in the work, not in the hallway between takes. When someone turns a film set into a circus act or blurs the line between performance and spectacle, Denzel doesn't play along. He checks out. Years ago, when asked about method acting, he said, "I've seen people hide behind it."
I always looked for that, for lack of a better word, angle. What's the story? That's the only thing I wrote on the...
That's not commitment. That's ego in costume. That line came long before Leto's headline-making antics, but it locked in Denzel's perspective. He's not interested in actors chasing attention in the name of process. He only respects what shows up on screen. So when The Little Things was announced in 2021, people expected sparks. Denzel and Leto, two Oscar winners facing off in a dark crime thriller. But when the press cycle started, something felt off. Denzel kept his focus on the director, the script, even Rami Malek, but Leto's name barely surfaced. Insiders said the set had a strange rhythm. Leto reportedly stayed in character the entire shoot, never once speaking to Denzel as himself. And Denzel, he didn't protest. He didn't argue. He just locked into his own craft, delivered his scenes, and left. Once the camera stopped rolling, the distance only grew. When the film dropped, Denzel skipped joint press junkets with Leto. His comments about co-stars were polite but short. Meanwhile, Leto showered him with praise, calling him a legend and a dream collaborator. But Denzel, he never returned the favor. That silence wasn't random, it was calculated. And in Denzel's world, silence is the sharpest verdict of all. He doesn't criticize in interviews. He doesn't clap back in podcasts. He simply moves forward without you. And years later, when asked if he enjoyed working with Leto, he gave nothing but a short nod and the words, "It was interesting." That wasn't praise, it was the cleanest way to say never again. Jared Leto may live for transformation, but Denzel Washington only lives for truth. He doesn't want the madness, he wants control. And when another actor brings chaos, no matter how talented they are, they don't survive long in his world. Number 3, Ethan Hawke. Denzel Washington never confuses chemistry with compatibility. Just because a scene sizzles on screen doesn't mean the energy behind it was clean. In Training Day, the tension between Denzel and Ethan Hawke wasn't just scripted, it was real. That edge made the movie unforgettable. But behind the cameras, things were far less heroic. There was no mentorship, no warmth, just two actors working from opposite ends of the craft. Hawke was still on the come-up, young, raw, and hungry. He brought indie credibility and theater roots, but his style leaned on naturalism, loose, unpredictable, living in the moment. He liked stumbling through a scene until something clicked. But Denzel, he doesn't stumble, he constructs. Every move is deliberate, intentional, locked in before the director even yells action. Watching Hawke treat a scene like a sandbox didn't sit right with him. Later, at a roundtable, Denzel summed it up perfectly without naming names. Some people show up hoping something will happen. I show up knowing what I'm going to do. That wasn't shade, it was a philosophy. And it explained exactly why Hawke's vibe didn't survive past Training Day. The film earned awards, applause, and legendary status. But once the camera stopped, their connection ended too. While promoting the movie, fans expected stories of brotherhood and creative bonding. Instead, interviews were stiff. Hawke was animated, praising Denzel like a true fan. But Denzel, he nodded politely, smiled, then pivoted, talking about the director, the city, or the script, never about Hawke himself. And when people later assumed some of the movie's rawest exchanges were improvised, Denzel was quick to clarify. That was in the script. No, I didn't ad-lib that. Translation: don't confuse his precision with somebody else's looseness. He never disrespected Hawke's talent, he just refused to validate his process. That silence said enough. Years later, when projects like The Equalizer and Fences rolled around, stories loaded with weight and morality, Hawke's name never came up. And when asked in 2017 if he'd work with Hawke again, Denzel cut it off with a flat, "We already did something good." That was his version of closure. With Denzel, it's never about fame or box office. It's about clarity, discipline, and intent. And if you don't match that, you're gone. Denzel doesn't need his co-star to think like him, but he does need them to show up ready. Listen more than you talk. Trust the structure, don't fight it. Ethan Hawke's loose edges didn't threaten him. They just got under his skin. The improvising, the rambling, the wandering, it all felt like static. And Denzel doesn't work with static. Even decades later, when Training Day gets revisited, he praises the writing, the tone, the atmosphere, but rarely the other actor. He respects the film, not the collaboration. Yes, Hawke landed an Oscar nomination, but he never landed Denzel's trust. And in Washington's world, once that door closes, it never reopens. Number 4, Mark Wahlberg. Denzel Washington doesn't go looking for friction, but if it shows up, he won't pretend it isn't there. In 2013, he signed on to Two Guns, a buddy action flick with Wahlberg as his co-lead. On paper, it looked simple. 2 big stars, guns blazing, a little banter, box office magic. But off camera, things weren't that smooth. Because here's the truth. Denzel treats every movie, even a popcorn action flick, with the same intensity he brings to Shakespeare. Wahlberg, not so much. On screen, their chemistry popped. The script gave them sharp dialogue and equal spotlight. But when the cameras cut, the energy shifted. Wahlberg joked, riffed, played to the crew. Denzel didn't. He was locked in, steady, moving with precision. One assistant put it best, Denzel doesn't move like that. He's locked in. Everything else is a distraction. Wahlberg's improv-heavy, instinct-first style clashed against Denzel's deliberate, structured approach. No arguments broke out, no fireworks, just 2 men speaking completely different creative languages. And Denzel? He didn't bother correcting it, he just pulled back. He kept his conversations with Wahlberg short, stuck to his process, and left when the workday ended. Wahlberg, meanwhile, stayed social, cracking jokes, keeping the energy light. That didn't spark chaos, but it did create distance. By the press tour, the divide was obvious. Wahlberg leaned into his usual charisma. Loud jokes, playful banter, one-liners for the audience. Denzel, though, he smiled less, spoke less, sometimes didn't even look Wahlberg's way when answering questions. Fans might have missed it, but anyone who knows Denzel's patterns could see it crystal clear. He only uplifts the people he respects. And this time, the silence said everything. When Denzel respects you, he makes it clear. He names you in interviews, lifts you up, sometimes more than once. But Wahlberg, he never got that treatment. Instead, Denzel steered every answer back to the director, the script, or the overall team effort, never the partner standing beside him. And when asked years later if he'd work with Wahlberg again, his response was short and sealed. It was fun. That wasn't anger. That wasn't shade. That was closure. Because for Denzel, chemistry isn't enough. If the foundation isn't built on discipline and mutual respect for the process, he doesn't revisit it. Wahlberg wasn't unprofessional. But to Denzel, his looseness made the work feel too lightweight. And when the work feels light, Denzel lets it go. No reunions, no second chances, no follow-ups. Wahlberg still praises the experience. But Denzel, his silence says it all. Number 5, Tyrese Gibson. Now here's where things get different, because Denzel almost never responds to criticism. And that silence, it tends to echo louder than any statement. Back in 2014, Tyrese gave an interview that didn't shake Hollywood, but it revealed one thing. He wanted to work with Denzel desperately. He admitted it openly, calling Washington the actor he admired most, the man he dreamed of sharing the screen with. But as the years passed and no opportunities came his way, Tyrese's admiration started shifting into frustration. He began speaking out, saying Denzel was gatekeeping, accusing him of not doing enough to mentor younger black actors, especially those outside Hollywood's inner circle. At one point, Tyrese even said, "Denzel never gave me a shot. He keeps to himself, doesn't pass the torch." And Denzel, he didn't bite. No statements, no interviews, no subtle clapbacks, just silence. And in Denzel's world, that silence is the response. At the time, there were 2 projects floating around with both names attached on paper. One a gritty police procedural, another an ensemble action drama with a faith-based angle. But before either script could move forward, Denzel reportedly pulled out of both. No explanation, no public story. He just walked away, exactly the way he always does when a line is crossed. This wasn't about ego, it wasn't about offense, it was about principle. And once that door shut, Tyrese was never walking through it again. Denzel has faced louder critics in his career, but Tyrese made one fatal mistake. He assumed visibility equals access. He thought fame, box office numbers, and a little overlap in genre automatically earned him a seat at Denzel's table. But Denzel doesn't hand out seats. He watches behavior. He studies intention. And when someone throws accusations without fully grasping the weight of their words, Denzel doesn't clap back. He disappears. Tyrese has always worked with raw intensity, wearing emotion on his sleeve. He acts with volume. But for Denzel, that level of transparency doesn't look like passion. It looks like instability. He values control, not just in the performance, but in presence. Emotional outbursts, public grievances, passive-aggressive interviews. Denzel doesn't see those as honesty. He sees them as noise. Everyone's got passion, Denzel once said, but not everyone knows where to put it. That line cuts deep, and Tyrese is the perfect example of what he meant. Even years later, Tyrese kept dropping Denzel's name, sometimes with respect, sometimes with shade. But Denzel, he never returned the gesture, not once. Not on red carpets, not in interviews, not even in industry roundtables about legacy. And that's the difference. It's not a feud. There's no screaming match, no headlines of bad blood. It's one man waiting by a door that was never going to open, and another man who quietly bricked it up and walked away. For Denzel, emotional volatility dressed as ambition isn't something he corrects. It's something he avoids. And for Tyrese Gibson, that rejection was never spoken out loud. It just became permanent. Number 6, Russell Crowe. On paper, they seemed like a dream pairing. Two heavyweight actors, two intense presences. And when American Gangster hit the screen, that energy was undeniable. But off camera, the connection never fully landed. They had actually worked together before, back in the 90s on Virtuosity, a loud, chaotic sci-fi flick. No tension, no fallout, but no friendship either, just another job. So when they reunited for American Gangster, the stakes were higher, the performances sharper, but the creative tension never went away. Crowe is known for being hands-on, sometimes to the point of clashing. He wants input, he wants creative say, even edging into editorial territory at times. But Denzel, that's not his lane. He doesn't operate with outside noise in his process, and the friction was impossible to ignore. Denzel believes in one thing above all: trust. Show up prepared, respect the process, and serve the story. Russell Crowe's behind-the-scenes intensity didn't offend him, but it wore him down. Everybody wants control. I want the story, Denzel once said during a press Q&A. And that summed it up perfectly. During the American Gangster press run, they sat side by side, spoke with respect, but the warmth wasn't there. No talk of future projects, no plans to reunite. Crowe praised Denzel endlessly, but Denzel, he kept his focus on the director, the themes, the film itself. Even years later, when asked to reflect on the movie, Denzel spoke about the era, the atmosphere, the structure, rarely about his co-star. And from him, that absence says more than any direct critique ever could. Denzel doesn't hold grudges, he holds standards. And when someone crosses that invisible line, he doesn't fight them, he doesn't feud, he forgets them. No headlines, no warnings, just silence where their name used to be. Because in Denzel's world, respect isn't demanded, it's observed. And that's why his circle stays small, his collaborations precise, and his reputation untouched. If you want more stories Hollywood won't admit, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Drop a comment with the one name you think deserved this list the most. We'll be watching. And remember, some actors avoid the list. The rest just don't realize they're already on it. See you on the next video.